All right, if you're returning from an ACL injury, I got two questions for you. First is, are you doing testing to get back to sport? If you're not doing testing to get back to sport, all you're doing is basically just gambling if what you've done in rehab is enough. And then question number two is, what are those tests? Because there's very different tests, from going to an ortho office and having them watch you do a lunge, to doing an FMS movement screen, to doing jump testing, or even force plate or biodex testing. So a lot of different stuff we can kind of dive into here. Really, in my opinion, one of the gold standards is going to be your force plate testing, right? Because you're going to be able to see how you're jumping, how quickly you're contracting those muscles, and that's going to tell you a lot of information. And the research just shows that from that information, we can see, how high your risks are for re-injury. When we do a movement screen, the FMS, I think, is a great place to get a baseline of where people are and potentially tweak programs based off of that. But we've shown that, specifically improving your FMS score isn't really linked to decreasing the risk for injuries. So I don't think it's a good indicator for if you're ready to come back to your sport. Then we can get into doing our jump testing. So a lot of times, a lot of clinics don't have the technology of a force plate or something like that. So we can do movement screens where we're actually going to be jumping. Usually it's like a single leg jump test for distance, one leg versus the other, which I think is better than a movement screen, right? But at the end of the day, you're testing the end goal of something there, not how you got there. So the body does a really good job of faking through injuries sometimes. What I mean by that is, let's say we have to do a single leg jump to get back to sport and make sure it's within a certain percentage of asymmetry. Maybe my knee doesn't want to bend as much because I had a patellar or it's just angry for whatever reason. Well, I might be able to compensate with my ankle and my hip and still get to that same end goal of whatever the distance is and make it similar to my other leg, even though I'm jumping completely different. It also doesn't take into account the fact of how we're landing, how we're absorbing that force and producing force back out of that landing, okay? So when I take into consideration these things, I think, again, those are good tests for almost in the middle of rehab to kind of see where we're at. But a true return to sport test, we need to be able to see how your body can slow itself down. We need to be able to see very small details very quickly, which we can't see with the naked eye. Again, from research, we know that ACL injuries happen, at least non-contact ones, happen within the first 50 milliseconds of planting that foot. We're not going to be able to see that quickly. So we need some kind of technology to actually show us that. Interforce plates, we can do our jump testing. So personally, I do counter movement jump. I'll do depth jump. I've done a rebound jump with Hawkins. And then, I'll do ISO back squat and stuff like that too. Generally for return to sport, that's all fine. We just need to do the counter movements and the depth jumps. So from that, again, we can see peak power, great. We can see peak power from one leg to the other, great. The end goal doesn't necessarily matter of how we got there, matters more. So if I'm doing a depth jump, I'm stepping off a box, I'm landing on the force plates, absorbing that energy, and coming back up, jumping as high as I can. So the big thing here for me is eccentric rate of force development, meaning when I hit the force plates on the way down, how quickly can I stop my body weight before I'm producing that force back up to that peak force? That's the rate of force development, okay? And that's in the milliseconds. And we can see a lot of times people are getting to those end goals of being symmetrical from single leg jumps. But if you look at how they're actually landing, how they're decelerating and coming back out of the hole from a jump, I've seen it where the injured leg is literally not contracting at all within the first 100 milliseconds. And then it shifts back across to one side and then back over, and it catches back up and gets to the same peak force or peak power, right? So if injuries happen within the first 50 milliseconds and that side's not contracting and all that force is on the other side, you're increasing your risk for injuries there too. So a lot of research showing where we need to be on those as well. So basically what I'm saying is, find somebody that can actually give you some specific data on how you're producing force or how you're jumping, versus just eyeballing something or giving you a end result of a performance test. If you're not doing that kind of stuff, then again, you're just guessing on what you're going to come back and if you're going to get injured or not. So hopefully you guys have access to something like that. If you have questions, feel free to DM me. I'm happy to send you guys research, some stuff you can do at home, and hopefully that helps out. Good luck.